see if it's accepted. You started the stream, right? Yeah, see, here we are.
This is Twitch's live.
Yeah. You wait for it. You're live there. Now Facebook is always the slowest. All right? Facebook makes you hit an extra button. Come on. There you go. Yeah. Now you can go sit down and talk to the people.
So what about the camera? You gotta do
The timer?
the timer.
I'm going to try to transfer a button that says timer onto your screen.
So you just sit there. Timer.
Yeah. How's that sound?
That sounds. Yeah.
You feel empowered?
Hello, pre-show. I'm the engineer now. We are breaking Think Twice radio history. All thanks to Richard. You've never engineered and started your own show?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I'm the first non.
Well, no, I mean, it wasn't my own show. It was that somebody wanted me to be on their show. I said, "How can I do that? I'm the engineer." And they said, "Well, can't you just set it up and come on and join us?" And I said, "Yeah." So, but that doesn't. It's not like you having your own show.
Yeah.
So you are a trailblazer. Okay, now I'm going to transfer a button. And I think I'll keep the same name and everything. How's that sound?
Okay. That'll be the next engineering thing. Well, how to put a button on that.
No, you don't want that. You wouldn't want that power.
Too much.
No,
Great
I mean, you could mess
responsibility.
it up for all the other shows.
Risk reward. With
Okay.
great power comes great responsibility.
And how about if I put it, you want it next to Vin 9 or next to Matt?
What about the top right corner?
Up there? Boom. There.
Timer. I see it.
And now let's see if it works. Yes.
Whoa.
You want to go on the air?
Hey, Ron. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, Think Twice Radio, and welcome to another exciting episode of Austin Audits. I am Austin, the auditor. So welcome to my show. And on this show we cover Buffalo City Hall, and because nobody else is watching. So today's episode, going to cover a couple different topics. So going to start with a recap of last week's committee meeting. So we had both the Civil Service committee meeting, which I think was maybe one of the most groundbreaking committee meetings in civil service history, where we had some accusations that we may be going back to the Griffin days. I don't know what that means, but we'll dive into that. And then also the community development meeting. So last week, the East Side Parkways Coalition and the Kensington Expressway had its first time in the council chambers, which was, we'll dive into that. And also, I'm going to recap from last week's, dive a little deeper into the proposed police shooting facility right outside the Central Terminal. Be auditing that. I've been doing some auditing work, so be diving deep into some of my Freedom of Information law requests. Then we will be going to some other foils as well. And then finally, we'll close it out with some other topics, and who knows how this will go. So first, let's dive into last week's Community Development Committee meeting. I think that's probably a good place to start. But so last Tuesday, the Eastside Parkways Coalition filed an item before the Buffalo Common Council. And the Eastside Parkways Coalition just requested to express their concerns with the council members regarding the project. So that was kind of the item that was filed. And so the Common Council did end up forwarding that item from the regular meeting to the community development. And it came before the council, which was exciting, but it was a very interesting episode in the chamber. So essentially, the way the council structured the meeting was they had ESP, or the Eastside Parkways Coalition, was allowed 3 speakers, and then the council also did have 3 speakers from ROC, or the Restore Our Community Coalition. So 3 speakers from each organization had their chance in the microphone, and the council members, they said this was to make the discussion fair and make it both sides of the argument. And I think, first of all, it needs to be acknowledged that it was an extremely bizarre. Just a bizarre precedent. All my time watching the council, I've never seen the council essentially call in witnesses to kind of oppose the community's expressed concerns. And again, this item was just the Eastside Parkways Coalition writing the council to express their concerns and talk about their concerns. And the Restore Our Community Coalition had nothing to do with those concerns. There was no mention in the item. So I'm not sure exactly how the Restore Our Community Coalition got invited to also have 3 speakers. But yeah, that's how it was set up. And I'll get a little deep into kind of my feedback, but I think essentially after the meeting, I mean, both organizations had 3 speakers, and I could go on about how maybe that wasn't the best format, but it was just a very bizarre format. I've never seen the council essentially call in witnesses from another organizations to oppose the concerns of a community group. And I really think that was a tactic or a strategy used by power, right? The Common Council, to kind of frame the issue the way they want the issue to be framed. And really, just the way that council meeting was set up, where you had 3 speakers from essentially, they said, both sides of the issue, made it seem like there is some sort of issue to be had, have a debate. It was almost set up as like a debate, a counterattack. And I think that was a way for, the power of the Common Council and the power of the people in charge to kind of frame the issue as, oh, this is the community divided, which I really don't think. And there's been some more kind of framings in the media, and then essentially you saw even the media coverage of this event. I think I saw different outlets record it as like the battle over the Kensington or East and Rock battle out. And even on Sunday, actually at 1 p.m., there's 3 members of the Eastside Parkways Coalition on Carrie Saunders' podcast on WUFO 96.5. Even there, I think there was Carrie Saunders and Howard Johnson, who is the Deputy Commissioner of Elections, and my opinion is just kind of a shill of the establishment. But even they immediately kind of attacked ESP and said, you are the people battling Rock. You are the people fighting Rock's plan. And I really don't think that is, I don't know, it's just very clear that you're kind of seeing how the people in power are trying to frame the issue. They're trying to frame it as this battle between 2 community groups that have a differing vision. And that's really not, it's not really what I think the issue is. I think it deflects from the larger kind of battle, which is, this is not ESP and Rock versus Rock. This is ESP and Rock and the citizens of Buffalo versus the New York State Department of Transportation. Because essentially, the Eastside Parkways Coalition obviously is this newer coalition that has formed, recently since, in the last few years to oppose the Kensington Expressway project. But before ESP, Rock was carrying this flame, carrying this battle, and the opponent is the same. The opponent is the New York State Department of Transportation. The New York State Department of Transportation, or NYSDOT, they were the ones that destroyed and demolished Humboldt Parkway in the first place. And they are the ones that maintained the Kensington. And they're the ones now that are the lead agency of the project. And I think, I don't know if it was intentional, but it was just very curious that the way, right, and obviously we're in the council chamber, so they set the rules. This is their show. This is their theater, their stage to frame the issue was. And I think we were grateful at ESP to have an opportunity to have the mic. And obviously you don't have a lot of control over the parameters of that. But I just think it was, I don't know if it was intentional. The more I'm kind of hearing power kind of comment on the issue, I think it is intentional. It's their way of framing this issue as the community divided, because essentially another parameter was that each speaker had 3 minutes. So 3 speakers from each group had 3 minutes. And I don't know if anything really productive kind of came out of this meeting. I mean, both groups kind of got to voice their point of view, which I think was helpful. But essentially, I don't think really anything major came out of the meeting. I mean, it was just with the parameters of how the meeting was set up. There's really not much you can dive into. And you even saw, after the meeting, essentially the city's majority leader, Leah Halton Pope, the Ellicott District council member, kind of threw her hands up in the air and said, hey, this is unfair that you're asking me to take a position when there's 2 sides of the community. You all need to get on the same page and work together, ESP and Rock. And yeah, you can see it was kind of framed as that was kind of the ultimate end goal to say, and again, it's the council saying, you're divided, you need to get on the same page, I can't make a position. Which I just think is faulty logic because, right, elected officials are supposed to take positions. They're elected by the people of their districts and the people of their city, and ultimately they're elected to take positions. And I think it was just kind of a cop-out of the people in power not wanting to take a position. In addition to, right, this being framed as a community being divided, the other kind of talking point that the East Side Parkways keeps running into is this isn't a city issue. That's kind of a repeated line, a propaganda point that we keep hearing. I mean, we've heard it. The East Side Parkways had multiple residents and members reaching out to council members in the process of, just voicing support for, at this point, we're not asking them to take any major action. We're just asking them to hear our concerns. And kind of universally, the talking point that was going around amongst all the council members was that this isn't a city issue. This isn't a city issue, which is kind of, it's just another talking point that you can see, the people in power are getting behind, and that's their talking point that they're sticking to. And I really think I'd like to see the community kind of push back on that point of it not being a city issue. And I could get into a lot of the weeds of how it actually is technically a city issue. But I think to keep it simple, the talking point, the rebuttal needs to be, right, anytime we hear the Kensington Expressway is not a city issue, I think we need to push back simply with the City of Buffalo is an official cooperating agency for the project, which it is. So actually in the environmental assessment, the City of Buffalo Office of Strategic Planning and Department of Public Works are both listed as cooperating agencies, which are essentially agencies that the lead agency needs to work with in order to help get the project done. So the City of Buffalo actually is an official cooperating agency of the Kensington Expressway. So the whole premise that this isn't a city issue, really what they mean when they say this isn't a city issue, they really mean is the city is not the lead agency for the project. And I think you're seeing, right, this is kind of an eye-opening for me. I mean, I'm somewhat knowledgeable about local politics, but it's very eye-opening to me of how politics work at the local level and also in New York State of, right, there's a lead agency and you can just see that kind of the top-down, nobody steps on anyone's toes. And yeah, this is a city issue, right? Obviously, the Kensington Expressway affects city residents. City residents are the ones that are breathing in the toxic fumes from the Kensington Expressway. They are the people that will need to, live next to the highway for the next 100 years if it's built. Right? It's a public health issue. It's a quality of life. It's, the historic legacy of having our world-class parks system stolen from the people of Buffalo. And those are all city issues, but when city officials are saying it's a city issue, they mean technically, the entity, which is the City of Buffalo, is not the lead agency, which is much different than this isn't a city issue. Again, the city is a cooperating agency on this project, and the City of Buffalo needs to cooperate in order for this project to go on. And essentially what East Side Parkways is asking the council to do ultimately is not cooperate and push back to represent the residents of Buffalo. And it's very disappointing because, too, New York State is a home rule state, so actually the way that our government is set up here in New York State is that the actual, right, we're home rule. So local municipalities have ultimate power and jurisdiction over their little piece of turf, and it kind of funnels up. So essentially, the higher levels of government are supposed to defer to the local levels. And the reason, one of the problems is that our city government, municipal government, has not taken any strong position or really has not done any work. So they're kind of deferring to NISTOT. And I think kind of when you compare and contrast this, right, we're in Buffalo, New York, which is a city in upstate New York, but to our east, the city of Rochester, who I think in many ways is probably the most similar city to Buffalo. When you research their highway removal project, which was right now the inner loop, so they've already removed, I believe it's the east and now working on the north, or they're working on two sections, east and north of the inner loop. Really, their municipality, the city of Rochester, the entity which is the city of Rochester, has taken on a leading role in the removal of the highway, and that's completely different when you contrast it with the city of Buffalo, who has not done anything and now is being pressured by the citizens to take a position, and is essentially saying this isn't our issue, this isn't a city issue. So it's very different, and I think, right, the big takeaway from that from the meeting is just, right, this was a first step, and it feels like maybe the council members are wiping their hands, saying, "Good, they're out of our chambers. We don't have to acknowledge it." But this just definitely feels like the first step in engaging the local council and the local elected officials, because ultimately we'd like them to take a position on the Kensington Expressway. So that's kind of the big thing. So again, kind of recapping the community development group. 3 members of ROC spoke, and 3 members of the East Side Parkways spoke at the meeting, and it was really kind of puppeteered by the council to have this kind of 3v3 debate style discussion. And even at one point in the meeting, some member of the public got up to the mic and said, "Hey, I want to say something. I came here to speak about my issue." And it was clarified by the council that this is not a public issue or not a public meeting. And if they'd like to have their concerns heard, they could file an item. But obviously we know if we file your item, they're just going to receive and file it. So it was just a very controlled environment. I think it was a good first engagement. It was good to have this topic held in the thing. But yeah, it just felt very kind of orchestrated towards the desired outcome, which was them ultimately saying, you all are divided. You all get on the same page. Until you're on the same page, I'm not going to do anything, type of thing. And it's good. I think, right, you just learn as you do these things. So we never knew how the council would react to our item. But the one big thing that's emerging is, the people in power are trying to frame this as ESP versus ROC. It does feel like they're kind of trying to pit these 2 community groups against each other, which is really, the East Side Parkways Coalition is not fighting ROC. This is not about East Side Parkways versus ROC. This is East Side Parkways versus NISTOT. This is ROC versus NISTOT. It's been, the people of the city of Buffalo versus NISTOT. Even before the construction, once NISTOT made the proposal, you've had residents of the city of Buffalo fighting for what was theirs and what was their birthright, which was a world-class Olmsted Park system. And even kind of the whole concept that this group's been working for 30 years, so it's going to taint their legacy if we modify NISTOT's plan now. I'll push back on that. But what about the people that predated ROC? Because before 1990 to 1950, that 40-year period, there was, residents and activists that were advocating for the ultimate dream, which is full restoration of Humboldt Parkway. And what about those people? Do their efforts not matter? And I think, I just think right now that we've engaged with power a bit here, really, I'd love to see kind of a talking point of the citizens of Buffalo try to push back on this narrative of it's 2 community groups against each other, fighting each other, battling each other. This isn't a fight. This isn't a battle between 2 community groups. This is a battle between the city of Buffalo residents and the New York State Department of Transportation. And I think any other framing of that issue other than NISTOT versus the city of Buffalo people, I think is improper. So that's the one thing. And then also, the emerging talking point that the Kensington Expressway isn't a city issue. It is a city issue. The city is an official cooperating agency for the Kensington Expressway project, let alone that the Department of Public Works has given permission and waived some historical property procedures that would need to be used to give NISTOT access to the park to build temporary, let me see if I get this right, excavation tiebacks. Or essentially when they build the wall, they have to put tiebacks in the road. So there's that issue, and there's many other issues of how it technically is a city of Buffalo issue. And essentially the other issue too that I've started to look into is actually the maintenance of the tunnel, right? So the New York State Department of Transportation's environmental assessment, it says in the report that the tunnel is going to cost $5 million a year in maintenance costs and operating costs. And I think there's an Instagram account, the 33 Public Opinions account, but they actually did make a good point, or they pointed out that the $5 million cost is not adjusted for inflation. So that's just the current cost of maintaining the tunnel. So it's actually this escalating, inflating cost to maintain the tunnel. And essentially, when I looked into, there's this $5 million cost that's mentioned in the EA. And if you go in the rough draft of the EA, it says in the final design, there will be a transportation management plan or a PAM. Let me see if I can get this right. But there's a plan to maintain the tunnel. And essentially when you go into the final design, it still says the same language. It says in the final design there will be a maintenance plan. And I'm curious, as an auditor, I can't seem to find this maintenance plan. So I could be wrong. It could be exist, and I think any good auditor will kind of, not fully jump to conclusions. But at this point, it appears to me that perhaps the New York State Department of Transportation forgot to come up with a maintenance plan, and that the actual maintenance, the financial cost of maintaining the tunnel might actually not be determined on what entity, right? Is that the City of Buffalo's cost to maintain? Is that NISTOT's cost to maintain? It's unclear because I don't know if it's been studied. So that's another issue that I think, who knows, could be a thing. But yeah, that was community development. And we'll see. I think there's still engagement to be done. And I don't think this will be the last time that the Kensington Expressway and the Humboldt restoration will be in the council chambers, because it is a city issue. And as the one resident said that didn't have a chance to have the mic, there's many more residents, and right, we've been asked to kind of get consensus in the community on the Kensington, and in order to do that, you need many more voices to be heard. So I'm hopeful, but it was a good engagement. It was good to actually even be acknowledged in the chambers. There was a real feel that we were just going to be received and filed. So, okay, so that was the community development. I wanted to jump into the Civil Service Committee. So the Civil Service Committee was, last week was one of the most eye-opening Civil Service Committee meetings I've ever witnessed. And I think I've done some coverage on this in the past, but the Civil Service Committee it's scheduled for 15 minutes every other week. So there's only a half an hour per month devoted to the Civil Service Committee. And really, the only thing this committee does is just rubber stamp appointments. There's really never anything that happens in that meeting, although there's lots of issues in the city's civil service, as I've covered in past episodes. And I think civil service does not get the attention it needs, especially when you consider that the city's largest expense, when you look at the actual category of expense, is personnel costs. So actually the city's largest expense is, in most of the tax dollars, just go to personnel. So that's both current employees, so people that work currently at City Hall, but also retired employees, because the city's on the hook for pension expenses and health insurance expenses of actual retirees. So when I actually think of the output of City Hall tax dollars, it mostly goes to personnel services. So when you consider that the largest portion of the city's nearly $600 million budget is personnel service, the idea that, the committee, the Common Council devotes only 15 minutes of oversight every other week to civil service is really, right? I think you can assume what happens, right? If no one's watching, stuff happens. And yeah, it was eye-opening because essentially Councilmember Wyatt filed a resolution requesting, more information on grievances and terminations by City Hall employees. So when I saw that, my ears perked, obviously, right? As someone that, was negatively impacted by the city's flawed and corrupt grievance and termination processes, my ears perked up. I was like, oh, this never gets the attention it deserves. But essentially, Councilmember Wyatt, right, he called in the Human Resources Commissioner into the council chambers, which is amazing because the Human Resources Commissioner has never appeared in the chambers in my time viewing, right? She also, right, Gladys Herndon-Hill, the city's Human Resources Commissioner, was in the chambers to answer questions. And essentially, Councilmember Wyatt implied that there may perhaps be a class action lawsuit, or that there's an extremely hostile work environment within City Hall because of, he mentioned a number of employees have, complained to him about the hostile work environment and about improper terminations and grievances. And he also implied that it seemed like a black employee had actually came to him and told him that somebody told them that the City Hall was, quote unquote, going back to the Griffin days, which, right, so what does that mean? So Jimmy Griffin is, he's the former mayor of Buffalo, and I think really when you think of Jimmy Griffin, he's kind of like the South Buffalo political establishment. I mean, many of the cogs of Jimmy Griffin's political machine still operate and maintain the levers of power in City Hall. I mean, the perfect example of that is our current acting mayor. So current acting mayor Chris Scanlon, how did he get onto the council? He got appointed to the council, and why did he get appointed to council, not someone else? Well, he's actually the son of Jimmy Griffin's patronage czar. So he's, right, it's kind of this insider culture. I've never had the opportunity to be appointed to the council, and here we're in this current, bizarre period in time where for 18 months we have, Jimmy Griffin's patronage czar son, who's acting as our mayor and was not elected mayor, essentially using the mayor's office to campaign to be the next mayor. So just kind of, and many other things. But I think it was implied in that quote, right, that if we're going back to the Griffin days, it sounded like there was someone within City Hall threatening or intimidating a black employee to kind of say, hey, I don't know. I don't want to read into that, but that was probably the most eye-opening quote I've ever heard in the council chambers. And essentially, that was Chair Wyatt that said that. And he kind of pressed the Human Resources Commissioner to learn more about grievances and the city's official position for grievances. And the Human Resources Commissioner, she immediately said, I will not call them grievances, I'll call them complaints, which, right, I don't know why she changed that language, but essentially she kind of deflected from what the city's official grievance system is. And that's why I kind of wanted to, so I actually do have an item on the council agenda, but yeah, I wanted to take a look at, the city does have actually collective bargained grievance and arbitration procedures. So this is an actual Article 20 of the CBA. And yeah, it looks like the screen's frozen here, but essentially, yeah, that is, the city does have a collectively bargained, process for dealing with grievances. And yeah, so I have filed an item with the Common Council, and it's actually on tomorrow's agenda. Let's see if I can pick it up here. Oh, it's frozen. Okay, we're gonna have to pivot here, but I'll pull it up. But yeah, so I do have an item on tomorrow's Common Council agenda, so I'll try to pull it up here because I can read it. But yeah, essentially, when I heard, right, Gladys Herndon Hill, the city's commissioner, was not being forthcoming on the true procedures revolving around grievances and terminations. Essentially, I believe, because I've covered this in the past, because the city, I believe, is systemically violating the collectively bargained grievance procedures, right? So let me pull up this item, but I filed an item to kind of give Chair Wyatt, because he was explaining too, it creates this hostile culture in City Hall because, right, he was saying how people can't get lawyers because lawyers are afraid to take the cases because of, the pushback and just what that would mean to put your kind of career on the line to take a civil service item here. So I did want to kind of read my item. So I did send a letter to the commissioner. So item 25-576. I'm Austin. Support for resolution 25-522. So this is an audit addendum to the resolution requesting a report on grievances, hiring, and terminations. So I'll read kind of the item that I filed here. Dear Honorable Councilmember Wyatt, I am writing in response to the resolution you filed requesting a report on grievances, hiring, and terminations. As someone who has directly experienced the challenges and injustices within the city's civil service system, I share your concerns about the need for a fair, transparent, and accountable process. To support your resolution, I have included Article 19.1, Grievance and Arbitration Procedure, of the agreement between the City of Buffalo and AFS CME Local 650. Upon review, this is the formal procedure for addressing any grievance, dispute, or controversy arising between the city and employees represented by AFS CME Local 650. According to the Comptroller's latest second quarter gap report, 404 city employees are represented by Union 650. See Figure 1 for a breakdown of employees by department. And then I have a breakdown here of essentially the Comptroller has this report, the second quarter gap report, where they list out employment levels across bargaining units, so 650, 264, the Police Benevolent Association, and then it has a breakdown of departments. So essentially, the city has 404 city employees that are under the representation of the bargaining unit 650, and 650 is just the city's white-collar union. So there's a police union, a fire union, a blue-collar union, but essentially when you talk about the people that work in City Hall, in the building, those people are mostly white-collar employees represented by 650. So additionally, I have included Article 20, Discipline and Discharge, which outlines the formal procedure for disciplining and terminating city employees represented by Union 650. It is important to note that Article 20 applies only to permanent employees, not provisional appointments. I have previously expressed my concerns regarding this distinction in item 24-2175, concerns provisional pipelines of the city's civil service system. I encourage you to review that item as I believe it is relevant to your resolution. Also see Figure 2 for the exact language of Rule 16.4. Then I included the articles and the discipline and discharge proceedings. Because essentially I believe that the council is, or the city of Buffalo is abusing Rule 16.4 of civil service, so which is around provisional appointments. And provisional appointments are temporary appointments that are supposed to last no longer than 9 months until a civil service exam is held. And the civil service exam helps identify the most competent people for positions. And then once you pass the civil service exam, you become a permanent employee. And as a permanent employee, you have certain protections because it's a political environment. Essentially, what I believe and what it appears to me, and I have all the evidence in the world to support this, because it happened to me, and I know there's other current provisional appointments, but essentially the city is violating Rule 16.4 by keeping provisional appointments longer than 9 months, and then keeping them provisional indefinitely. And because they keep people provisionally indefinitely, they get to appoint whoever they want instead of having an open civil service exam. And then by keeping people provisionally indefinitely, they can also strip workers of their collectively bargained Bill of Rights. So the rights to have a proper, investigation before you're terminated. And essentially they're doing this, I believe, to consolidate power, right? If you have the ability to bypass civil service exams, that means you don't have to hire the most competent people. You can hire, your cronies and your patronage hacks to fill those positions. And by doing that, right, then you can have maximum control because you can fire them at will, and you're not, you can fire them because you don't like them or because, they said something wrong to you versus, not doing their job properly. So I did include Rule 16.4 because something that I've learned as I've just interacted with City Hall is it doesn't appear anyone in City Hall reads anything, right? Not only are a lot of the common council members very ignorant to a lot of the rules and procedures of the city, because I don't think a lot of them do reading, but a lot of the reading, if they do any, they don't retain a lot. So I'm trying to be respectful to the common council when I, give them, here's the information, because a lot of them probably haven't actually read the classified rules of civil service, probably haven't not read the collective bargaining agreement, and they're just kind of ignorant to a lot of the things that they're supposed to be aware of, because a lot of the council members, they kind of just view the council member as like answering phone calls and cutting ribbons, that's a part of the job, but technically the job of a council member is to provide oversight to City Hall and how it operates. And then also another thing, so in the council chambers, Council Member Wyatt, he asked specifically around the grievance process. So he was asking, right, and Council Member or Commissioner Gladys Herndon Hill, she said in the chambers that the city's director of personnel, Samantha Jakubowski, is the person who is responsible for investigating this. So she's talking about how the director of personnel will get their complaint and follow up and does these thorough investigations. And Council Member Rashid Wyatt, he kind of pushed back on that. So he said, and she has no connection to the union, and council and the Human Resources Commissioner said no. And then he said, "Are you sure about that?" And she said no. And she was kind of sounding like, "No, absolutely not." But after doing a little auditing, it appears that Commissioner Herndon Hill's assertion that Samantha Jakubowski has no connection to the union is actually provable false. So that was part of the item that I filed here. So I did have here, so during the, so I have this section in the item I filed called Auditing Samantha Jakubowski's Relationship to the 650 Union. So during the March 25th Civil Service Committee meeting, Human Resources Commissioner Herndon Hill stated that Samantha Jakubowski, the city's director of personnel, is responsible for handling complaints. When asked whether Ms. Jakubowski has any relationship with Union 650, the commissioner responded no, and reiterated this response when asked again. However, this assertion appears to be factually inaccurate. Ms. Jakubowski is a former member of Union 650. According to Ms. Jakubowski's certificate of appointment to the Director of Personnel title in item 23-1228, her previous bargaining unit was listed as 650. Based on available information, Ms. Jakubowski was first appointed to the Personnel Assistant title in 2016 and has served in the roles of Personnel Specialist 1 and Personnel Specialist 2, during which she would have been a member of Union 650. And then I included this picture of Samantha Jakubowski's employee maintenance file. So this is when she was appointed to the Director of Personnel. But there actually is this BU 650, which I believe is Bargaining Unit 650. So it's showing that, prior to her appointment as the Director of Personnel, she was a dues-paying member of Local 650. So obviously, you can imagine, right? You have this Director of Personnel who represents the cities, ultimately represents the taxpayers to investigate, complaints, grievances. But she's also a former member, and obviously being a former member of 650 has kind of some ties to that organization. But not only was Ms. Jakubowski the previously a dues-paying member of 650, she's actually a colleague with the 650 president. So this is another list I have in the audit. So it says, Ms. Jakubowski is colleagues with the 650 president. So in addition to her prior membership in Union 650, Ms. Jakubowski works alongside Union 650 President Tracy Healy in the Department of Human Resources. Ms. Healy serves as a Personnel Specialist 1 in the Division of Civil Service, where she and Ms. Jakubowski work under the supervision of Commissioner Herndon Hill. Given their professional relationship, there may be a potential conflict of interest and concerns about impartiality in the process of grievances within the civil service system. And yeah, I've covered this before, but Tracy Healy is a problem, right? She was my former union president, and my perceptions, and I believe with every bone in my body, that my termination from City Hall was instigated by Tracy Healy. Because a week before I was terminated, Union President Tracy Healy confronted me in the council chambers under the pillars of knowledge, industry, and fortitude in the council chambers. And I'll keep our discussion, I'll keep that private because I'll let Ms. Healy, if she wants to have a public statement, talk about that conversation. But yeah, Tracy Healy, in my bones, I feel she is the underboss of the operation, right? She works in civil service, in the Civil Service Division of Human Resources. So in that job, she is responsible for issuing civil service exams. And then on the other hand, she's also the president of the 650 union. So she's also responsible for investigating any complaint or grievance filed by a City Hall worker, which was in my case was saying, hey, I've been a provisional employee for more than 9 months. Where's my civil service exam? It puts her in this uncomfortable position. And ultimately, it creates this conflict of interest within, right? The Human Resources Commissioner has direct supervision over both the union president, Tracy Healy, in the Civil Service Division, and also direct supervision over the Director of Personnel, Samantha Jakubowski, who's responsible for investigating. So you have these investigations where both sides are completely, right, are direct professional subordinates to the commissioner. So I believe that, and right, when you look at kind of grievances and terminations, you have this closed loop system where there's no segregation of duties. So you don't have people that are independent. You have people that are under complete control of the commissioner, being both the defense and the prosecutor on any of these grievances. And in my case, my perception is that, right, Miss Tracy Healy abused her power, and because I was filing a grievance that was damaging to her boss, Herndon Hill, and herself, because she's responsible for giving civil service exams, my grievance related to no civil service exams being for my civil service position, right? I believe she used that, and then exercised, I believe she instigated my termination. So she used her position of power to say, hey, this guy's a problem, let's take him out, and she fired me. So I do have the section on auditing Tracy Healy's role in grievances. So although Tracy Healy was not present at the Civil Service Committee meeting on March 25th, it is critical to include her in any good faith inquiry of grievances and terminations. As the president of Union 650, Ms. Healy sits on the grievance committee for every city department. This means that any grievance filed by any of the 404 city employees represented by Union 650 involves Ms. Healy. Below is Article 10.2 from the Local 650 CBA, which outlines the role of the Union Grievance Committee. Then I have the Union Grievance Committee. And Part B says, the Union Grievance Committee shall consist of the union president, committee chairman, and the grievance committee member of that department. So essentially, as union president, she's on the grievance committee for every department. So she's on the grievance committee for every single city employee. So you can see how, right, she has while she has this kind of entry-level position in Human Resources Personnel Specialist 1, she is also has a lot of power and influence because she's copied on every single human resources transaction. So in light of the significance of Ms. Healy's role in the grievance process, I strongly encourage you to request her presence at a future Civil Service Committee meeting to provide further insights into the grievance process, her involvement, and how she navigates any potential conflicts of interest arising from her dual roles within City Hall. I have concerns regarding Ms. Healy's ability to effectively manage these roles, as the overlap between her responsibilities as Union 650 president and her position within the Department of Human Resources may present significant challenges to impartiality. I trust that this audit addendum will assist in furthering your resolution, and I am available to provide additional audit research or testimony as needed. Please do not hesitate to contact me by email, and should you require my presence at the next or future Civil Service Committee. And yeah, that was my item, because ultimately I could go on there too in the formal communication, but I believe that there is a, I think it's Section 27 of New York State Civil Service Law prevents any personnel officer in a municipal civil service division from holding another position over which she exercises jurisdiction. And I believe you could make the argument that, you know, being a union president of 650, right, an organization that is the only recognized entity to collectively bargain and represent public employees, that is the jurisdiction that within their jurisdiction. If an organization that has the unique privilege of being the only entity to collectively bargain is not, you know, in the jurisdiction, that I don't know what type of organization would be under jurisdiction. So we'll see. So I filed that item. It is on tomorrow's Common Council agenda, and I did watch the Common Council's caucus meeting this morning, and it does seem that they are just going to receive and file the item, which I actually called Councilmember Wyatt this afternoon, spoke to one of his staff members, and I requested that it be sent to civil service because, yeah, there's issues in civil service, and again, when you think about that, personnel costs are the biggest expense of the city. The fact that there's this massive corrosion and corruption within the civil service division is concerning, right? That kind of brings me to my next point of I actually have filed some FOIL requests. So I did file a request. So yeah, I filed a FOIL request with the Human Resources FOIL department. So I filed this FOIL request to the Human Resources Department. So I said, hello, Human Resources FOIL Officer. Pursuant to the New York Freedom of Information Law, I hereby request copies of records or documents sufficient to identify the 3 persons who currently constitute the membership of the Municipal Civil Service Commission, per Rule 2 of the Rules for the Classified Civil Service of the City of Buffalo. Specifically, I'm requesting documents sufficient to show the names of the 3 current members of the Municipal Civil Service Commission, the dates of appointment and term of expiration for each member, the political party affiliation of each member, the name of the current president of the Municipal Civil Service Commission, a copy of the minutes from the Commission's most recent meeting, and please provide these documents in electronic format. If any portion of this request is denied, please provide a written explanation citing the specific legal grounds for the denial. So yeah, I did file a FOIL. Because the rules of city civil service say that there should be a municipal civil service commission, and I never heard of the Civil Service Commission. I'm curious if it exists, so we'll see. I foiled the Human Resources Department a few days ago and have yet to receive a response, but I'm going to be sure to follow up because I want to ensure that the rules of civil service are being followed, because I don't know if they are, and I suspect they probably actually are not being followed, because it wouldn't surprise me. I think there's a lot of corrosion, a lot of rot in the human resources system, and any good construction person or mechanic or plumber will know, right? When a system is corroded and rotted to the core, as it appears that the City of Buffalo's civil service system is, really what you got to do is you can't tinker on the edges, you can't patch it. You have to gut it down to the studs and rebuild it from scratch, which is what needs to be done. There's bullies in City Hall, and I seek to defy them because it's time. It's time for some massive reforms, especially on the upcoming budget hike, and we're going to get this massive tax increase. So one thing I'd love to see explored is the actual termination of all provisional employees. Yeah, if their jobs aren't important enough to hold civil service exams, heck, just fire them all, cut costs, and yeah, gut it down to the studs and rebuild from scratch. I think that would help the taxpayers of the city of Buffalo. So we'll see. That's one human resource foil. Another foil. So I got about 20 minutes here. So another issue I want to talk about, and I talked about briefly at last meeting, was the proposed police shooting range at 379 Paderewski by the Central Terminal. So the City of Buffalo Common Council on March 18th adopted a $5 million bond resolution for the construction of a new shooting and training police facility by the Central Terminal. And really, it's one bond, a $5 million bond, but the way the controller and Councilmember Nowakowski, the Fillmore District Councilmember, has described it is it's this consolidation of 4 previous bonds, which I think total around $3.9 million. But essentially, the city of Buffalo had been thinking about building a police station somewhere on Seneca Street, and then according to the bond, decided that it is now in the best interest to build a new police shooting training facility at 379 Paderewski. So I've been auditing this new police training facility, and it's really alarming because there's really no information online. So 379 Paderewski is the former Matt Urban Community Center, and I have some real concerns around the construction of this police facility. And it's called, I think the people in power are calling it a police facility, police training facility. But really, the bond says it's a shooting facility. So it's a place where police officers, I believe, can go shoot and train to shoot. And yeah, so I've been auditing it because there's not a lot of information. And actually, there's a group called Lola that is starting to petition, which I had brought up on my last show. But actually, the city charter allows residents of the city of Buffalo to petition any bond adopted by the city. And really, the reason this is important is because a bond means that they don't have money. They don't have the money for it. So they're borrowing money to pay for something. So in this case, the city of Buffalo is issuing a bond to borrow $5 million to build a new police shooting training facility. So actually, the city charter says that if within 30 days of the bond resolution being passed, the residents of the city of Buffalo can gather 10% of all registered voters' signatures and can actually file a petition. So that's exactly what Lola is doing here. It's pretty amazing, and I think I covered last week a little bit about how daunting it was, and essentially I kind of brush it off as this is an impossible feat, because it really is nearly impossible to get 20,000 signatures in, or I think they're saying 18,000 signatures in 30 days. So I commend Lola for trying. I mean, it's amazing that I'm going to help them as much as I can to help get that, but I've also, I think it is nearly impossible, and it's going to be very hard to get those. So I've already been thinking about ahead of, okay, well, how are some other ways we can shut down this this shooting training facility? And I think the council member, he had said that he met with the block club there, and he said they had no objectives because they had worked out how they were going to do it. But the issues with this is not just a community issue, right? They're building this police shooting facility in the Central Terminal neighborhood, but really when they issue a bond, they're asking all city taxpayers to pay for it. So it really is. This is another issue, right? Where in the council speak, they might try saying, "Oh, if you're not from the neighborhood, you can't have a position on this issue." But really, the second that the council and the controller's office issue this bond, they're essentially saying, right, we're going to issue this debt, and City Hall or City of Buffalo taxpayers will ultimately pay for the interest of this bond and pay it back. So really, it becomes a city issue. So I've been auditing this because I think there's some concerns. One I know is seeker. So the State Environmental Quality Review Act. Actually, New York State has some of the toughest and the best environmental regulations to kind of prevent haste and protect the environment. And I am really concerned that perhaps in the bond resolution filed with controllers, it says that they completed the prerequisite or the requisite seeker or state environmental quality review studies, but I cannot find any information online about any sort of seeker study or any sort of seeker determination that was made. So I've been auditing SEEKR, which is the State Environmental Quality Review Act, to kind of get more information. And essentially, I'll kind of dumb this down, both for myself, because I'm not a SEEKR lawyer, but also for those watching, because you might not know about SEEKR. But essentially, the first step of SEEKR is to determine what type of project it is. Is it type 1 or type 2? So type 1 actions are really complex issues that need further study. And then you have type 2s, which essentially a municipality or a developer can say, this doesn't meet the threshold. And there's a whole list of type 2 actions. So what I suspect happened here is that they determined that this was a type 2 action, and then because it's a type 2, they don't need to do further study, which would help them expedite this process. The issue is based on my understanding of SEEKR, right, in this SEEKR, a type 2 could be something like, right, we have this old house and we're rehabbing the house to still be a house, right? We're not changing the actual use and function of it. So there's a whole laundry list of things that are type 2s, and a lot of it is just kind of remediation, remodeling, right? If you have a house and you redo your kitchen, you don't need to do a SEEKR review because, right, it's just you're remodeling a kitchen that's already there. So I'm guessing, and I don't know because there's literally no information online. The only information about a SEEKR is that in the bond resolution, it says that they did a SEEKR analysis. Right, there's no information on the City of Buffalo's Office of Strategic Planning website about any SEEKR for 379. I've searched the council minutes. I did go to Councilmember Nowakowski's office and asked for the SEEKR documents, and they said after calling the council staff and chief of staff that no SEEKR documents came before the council. So they gave me the email of Deputy Commissioner Patrick Overdorf from the Buffalo Police Department. I did email him a few days ago and copied Fillmore Council staff, but have not received any replies. So I guess I'm going to kind of hypothetically, this is what I think they did. I think they probably determined it was a type 2 action, so they didn't have to do any further study. And I believe if they did, right, it's in the SEEKR law, it says that, good municipalities will document what type of action or how they reach that conclusion. So I'm curious, does the city even have any documentation of how they reached the type 2? But I believe they probably implied that because it's this building and they're just keeping it a building, they don't need to do SEEKR. The issue here is that, right, it's a former community center, a civic center. So by turning into a police shooting facility, you're actually changing the use of the building. And because you're fundamentally changing the use of the building, I believe you can't really just apply SEEKR 2 decisions, so it would require further study, especially in this case, right? It's a shooting range in a residential neighborhood. Literally, there's someone's house directly next to the building. So specifically around air, right? Or not air, but noise pollution, right? If there's literally shooting range going off, does that negatively impact the sound of the neighborhood? I believe that it would probably would. So essentially where I am now, I believe they either did the SEEKR study and they did it improperly, or 2, they didn't do the SEEKR at all. And either of those curious, I'm curious about learning more because I can't find any information. There's no information on the state's environmental bulletin board, which they say they post to. So I have filed a FOIL request, a Freedom of Information Law request with the Office of Strategic Planning. So pursuant to the New York State Freedom of Information Law, I hereby request access to and copies of all records related to the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEEKR, determination for the construction of a new police training facility / shooting range at 379 Paderewski, the project, referenced in Buffalo Common Council item 25-379, construction of a new police training facility. I specifically request 1, documents sufficient to show the classification of the project under SEEKR, 2, the SEEKR Environmental Assessment Form, EIF, including Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, or short EIF, if the project was an unlisted action. 3, any environmental impact statement or related assessments. 4, documents sufficient to show the project's coordinating agencies. 5, documents sufficient to show the project's determination of significance. 6, the final SEEKR determination and any supporting documents. 7, records of public notices, public comments, and responses regarding the SEEKR review. 8, documents sufficient to show publicly available hyperlinks where environmental statements for the project are posted as required by Chapter 641 of the Laws of New York. Please provide documents in electronic format. If any part of this request is denied, please provide the specific legal reason for the denial and inform me of the appeals process. Thank you for your time and assistance. Please confirm receipt of this request at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Open Data Matt. So essentially I'm asking the Office of Strategic Planning to provide the seeker documents for the shooting range at 379 Paderewski Drive, because I, one, believe they either conducted seeker and did it improperly, or two, didn't do it at all. So I'm curious in learning, because as I said, there's no information online. And as I noted there, I believe, and I could be wrong because I'm not a lawyer, but Chapter 641 of the Environmental Laws of New York require that the documents be publicly accessible. Right, and I think this brings up the larger issue of if our government is asking us to do the massive tasks of gather, 10% of the electorate's signatures within 30 days, how is the electorate supposed to know if it's even worth petitioning if there's no information about the project online? And outside of just the seeker documents, there is no information anywhere online about this facility. I really believe this was done purposely and intentfully by the comptroller. Right, the comptroller herself is a former police officer. So the comptroller, the common council, the police, I think they know that this project would not be popular. Therefore, they're trying to sneak it under our noses. So I'm really excited about the Lola petitioning, because even if we fail to gather 18,000 signatures, I think just trying, it builds that political will, that political courage to oppose things that are unjust in the first place. But even if that fails, I think the project didn't probably follow the seeker. The other thing that I'm auditing is actually 379 Paderewski is zoned N3R. So what's N3R? So N3R is a type of zoning the city uses, and it's essentially a residential neighborhood. So right now, 379 Paderewski is zoned in a residential neighborhood, right? It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It's zoned N3R. In zone N3R, that specific building is zoned, it's a civic building, so it's zoned for like social organizations. But actually, when you look at the city's green code, actually, I believe that this new proposed shooting facility, right, is a shooting facility for the police. Is that a social civic organization, right? If it is, I'm not in that club. But yeah, I believe that the shooting range at 379 falls under public safety facility. And if a public safety facility wants to be located within a residential neighborhood, it needs a special use permit. So another thing I'm curious on auditing is, right, was a special use permit issued for this project? And if not, right, they're issuing this bond before they get the permit. So potentially there's this possibility that even if the bond does go through, when the city asks for a special unit or a special use permit, we could gum up the chambers and we could oppose the actual issuing of a special use permit, because in order to have a public safety facility in a residential neighborhood, you actually need a zoning variance and you need a special use permit to allow that. So it is an allowable use. You can have a public safety facility in a residential neighborhood, but in order to do that, you need a special use permit, you need a zoning variance. And according to the city's open data website, there is no special use permit that's been authorized for 379 Paderewski. So ultimately, in order to construct a shooting facility, police training facility, I believe that building will need to be changed from a civic use to a public safety facility. In order to do that, they're going to need a special use permit from the Department of Permanent Inspection. So that's another angle we could take to kind of shutting this project down, because I think it's just another example, especially with the Bray Miller, of any time, right, a large facility becomes available in the city of Buffalo, the first thing they think about is, how can we use this for, how can the police reuse this facility? Especially when you think about, right, the main issue with the shooting facility is by issuing a bond, a $5 million bond, they don't have the money. They're borrowing money. They're racking up more debt to construct a police shooting facility. And especially when you think of all the issues in the city, right? When you think of, housing, when you think of, of the affordable housing crisis that we have, the lead pipe crisis, there's never any debt issued for those purposes, right? The city could issue a $5 million bond to remediate, old lead pipelines that are poisoning our children and residents. but they can never issue bonds only when it, we need to build a shooting facility for the police. Now we can issue debt, and right, the police already has the largest percentage of the city's budget, and I think, especially with the new budget coming up, this is this is something that we need to oppose because the city, we can't afford it, right? This police department needs to, right? They need to tighten their belts. They need to make use with we don't have this $5 million. We have this impending $50 million projected budget deficit, so we can't add another $5 million to that. And I recommend anyone interested in petitioning visit Lola on Instagram, and they're doing petitioning. So get your petitions. Let's see how many signatures we can get, and at least it will bring awareness. And that's something I wanted to kind of close the show with. But actually, on April 17th is the City of Buffalo's Police Oversight Committee, and the Police Oversight Committee rarely meets. So April 17th is going to be an exciting opportunity to bring forward your concerns with police oversight, and there's lots of issues to bring forward, but I'm hoping that this may be a potential issue that the community could file an item around this police shooting facility, because one, there's no information about it. I haven't seen any documents, any drawings, any renderings, any public hearings, any engagement with the community, right? And without any information, how are the residents of the city of Buffalo supposed to know whether this is something to petition or not? If there's no information about a basic environmental review, let alone architectural drawings of the facility. So, I'm hopeful, and I think the April 17th police oversight meeting will be a good opportunity to bring forward concerns with this, because I think it's just another example of them trying to rush through a project, and very similar to the Kensington, where the state or the people in power are just rushing through, cutting corners because they think they can. I think this is another opportunity to potentially show them that they need to follow the laws too, right? If why do we as citizens need to follow the laws if the cops don't need to follow the laws that we have in the books? And if they're violating the seeker laws, they need to comply with those too, because because it's the law of the state of New York. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you found that enjoying, and tune in to next week's episode where we'll audit further, because God knows there's a lot to audit. So, Open Data, Matt signing off. Thank you.